Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another episode of Receivables Roundtable. Today, I'm here with my good friend and fellow data nerd, Mr. Jeff Ragsdale from TransUnion. How you doing today, Jeff?
Hey, I'm great, Adam. How are you?
I can't complain. I've really had a lot of fun getting to know you over the last couple of years, and specifically over the last years, I've had the opportunity to do some work with you and learn from you and kind of the different data sets that you have available to you. And so I want to talk about that a little bit today. But before we jump into that, could you tell everyone who has not been as lucky as me to get to know you through the years a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Yeah, no, Adam, thank you for that. So, yeah, my name is Jeff Ragsdale, and I have been with TransUnion about 15 years, and pretty much always either in collections or fraud. And I'm passionate about our industry because I just think that when you think about collections and what we do, it's the cornerstone of capitalism. And if you
Mhm.
can't collect, you know, we don't have a functioning economy. So I
Mhm.
absolutely love this industry. I'm passionate about it. And I want to use as much data as possible to make it as profitable for our clients. It's just it's a very important aspect for me.
Agreed wholeheartedly. And you've been with TransUnion for about 15 years. Could you tell everyone a little bit about your role at TransUnion and what it is that you do there?
Absolutely. So I've been in collections for about 12 of those 15 years. I spent a few years in fraud. And with that, I basically do best practices, implementation help. I do different things that will help people make not just, we don't want to be like a data provider, right? We want to
Mhm.
be a solutions provider. We want our customers to maximize their ROI on their investment. So we do a lot of free analytics. We do a lot of best practices, a roundtable. And because I have the whole country, I work with all our reps. I know what a lot of people are doing with our data. I know best practices. So I really want to get in, no charge to our customers. We just come in, help them refine their processes, think of new ideas and new ways to do things to kind of help drive that performance.
It's almost like an innovation incubator at no charge. So your job is basically to help people find new ways to use the data at hand.
Yeah, yeah, we want to get you so like dependent on our data that you're not going to leave us, right? We want that long-term partnership, and
Mhm.
we don't want to just be a data provider like it. We don't want to be. Yeah, we want to be that true solutions provider for you.
Understood, understood. And I've had the pleasure of working with you in that capacity and learning a little bit from you. And that was kind of where I wanted to kick off our conversation today, because it was my experience in working with you that you have to find, when you're working with a data provider, you have to find this appropriate balance of a feedback loop. And you and I talked a lot about the
Yeah.
feedback loop, and it's great for you to show us a new piece of data. It's great for us to try and deploy it. But if we're not having a conversation about the experiment itself, right? Everybody's out there running a data experiment.
Right.
And it's been my observation that unless we're unless we're discussing that experiment openly and talking about what are we trying to accomplish, what variables are we trying to manipulate here, and what result did we ultimately see when we manipulated those variables, and what maintained a constant throughout the process.
Right. Right. So to measure, you have to accurately measure kind of what is the champion, what's the challenger, right? And so
Mhm.
how you focus that study along, for example, we do a lot of scoring comparisons and analysis where people will use their current score, they're looking at a competitor's score, but they're still focused on that what that for their current score. So it's almost like a bias study, right? So
Yeah, 100%.
how do you do that, where you can not interrupt your operations, but where you can, again, accurately judge, again, a competing product or services, whether it be TransUnion or somebody else's. You've got to set
Mhm.
up those champion challengers the right way, so where you can adequately test, like, champion challenge, constantly champion challenge what you're doing, look for new ways, look for new ideas.
Well, in order to facilitate that process and to facilitate that feedback loop, I found it to be valuable to write a sixth grade scientific process
Yes.
document.
Yeah.
And I know how silly it sounds when I say it out loud that, like, oh, hey, I literally pulled out like some sixth grade notes and started working our way through it. But the reality of the situation is it created a transparent environment. It created documentation of the process, and it put us in a position to where we could have much more detailed conversations about the pros and cons, the benefits that we saw, and identified in some instances maybe misinterpretations that we had of the expectation. But by setting all of that up front, right, by establishing what is it that we're actually testing for, right, gathering that data, designing that experiment, and before you're even running that experiment, predicting or coming up with your hypothesis to what those results are ultimately going to be. And then I think the most important step that most people tend to forget as we look at the scientific process is actually communicating those results to others. And that's internally within our own organizations and communicating that around as to what we learned and what we found, but also communicating that back to the data provider. Because like you mentioned kind of in the intros, where you are working across the whole country and you have all of these insights and access to an understanding of different ways of doing things, if we don't communicate that feedback loop to you, I would like to think that that document provides you with a significant amount of information that allows you to help us navigate the path.
Yes. Yeah, it's that whole adage of ready, aim, fire. You really want to, or ready, fire, aim. You really have to take, a laser approach. I mean, you are setting your strategies,
Mm-hmm.
your operational, you know, all depend on how you consume this data and you utilize it, right? So making sure that you structure that study right and make
Mm-hmm.
sure you have the data and you have that, again, that champion and that challenger clearly defined, so you can you can get true results and not loaded results. It's very important. So that's what we do a lot. We do a lot of that. Now, one problem, because the good news is we're credit data, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's highly predictive, it's highly accurate, it's amazing data. The bad news is it's credit data. It's highly regulated. So there
Sure.
are parameters that the government has set up for us to, test, and we have to operate within those tests, but there are ways to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I like to do, is make sure we set up the studies properly to what you're saying, and that they're ready to go, and that we are able to do, the most meaningful studies that we can to provide the best value for our clients.
Well, and I think and it provides opportunity for us to review the data that's already run. Meaning, like if we're testing scoring, being able to take those scoring mechanisms and looking at the date, let's say old portfolios from last year, right,
Yes.
and run that same analysis on 2023 and say, what would my results have been given,
Correct.
given I ran this strategy throughout the previous year.
And I even like to get more granular than that. Like, I want to look at how how we doing by client, and let's look
Mm-hmm.
at contingency rates. Let's look at your, like, we can look up to 4 or 5 cost per account. So we can look at letter cost, employee cost, call cost, email cost, whatever. And then let's look at your contingency rate. Let's see what you're collecting by score band, and let us help you define by client where you start to lose money. Now, you may want to dip into some of those losing buckets to maintain, like, your mark, your leadership, your scorecard position. But at the same time, you can make those decisions smartly. Don't just look at it. A lot of our clients will do just like, hey, I want to know how our score does overall. I would love to
Mm-hmm.
get more granular in that. Let's look at it by client. Let's look at it by asset type. And let's really start to define where those strategies, because that's, unfortunately, with scoring and with data, when you buy data, it's like buying a treadmill. Weight doesn't fall off when you buy the treadmill, unfortunately. I can tell you that. It falls off when you use it, right? So,
Yeah.
and the more you use it, the more benefit you get out of the data.
I like that analogy, and I think it's very right. I mean, one of the challenges I've seen with organizations trying to leverage new data sets is their challenges in ingesting that data and establishing their useful cause for it. right? How are they actually going to leverage and use that data? And, I've seen a lot of organizations that try to figure everything out internally, right? They're the only ones that understand their particular way of doing things. I know, those that watch this podcast regularly have probably heard me talk a number of times about how organizations in this space are about 15% unique, right? About 85% of a collection agency operation, I'm going to say, is pretty much regulated to this point, right? So like there's the 85%, then there's that 15% of special sauce. And I think there's often a misconception or a misunderstanding about how much we can learn from our peers through the process of just kind of opening up, looking, listening, and trying to understand how others have succeeded and or failed based on their use of different pieces of information. I like the granular level that you talk about going down to, right? Because talking about the data from this grandiose perspective of here's a data dump versus going in and stratifying that information so that we can try to better understand on a per client basis, on a per product basis, on a per portfolio basis, how these things are ultimately performing and how we may even want to adjust our strategies based on, let's say, even different distributions of the scoring mechanisms across a particular portfolio or market segment.
Right. Yes. 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 Absolutely. I could not have said it. I could not have said it any better. Yes. Understanding that is going to be absolutely key to any kind of success. And then that also parlays like for debt buyers, understanding that performance post-purchase will help you pre-purchase price better, right? Win more deals,
Sure.
or maybe find more deals that you're willing to lose. I had a client who I worked with, really understood their scoring. They went to, they started working with a new debt buyer. They were like, this is the greatest, you guys, we believe in what you're doing. We're going to give you this great paper. And so the contingency agency took the portfolio in, they scored it, and there were no scores like what we would consider. They were all like the bottom score. So this and they were able just to return the paper, not work it, but they saved themselves a lot of money because they understood that because they understood how the different scores and attributes work for them. They were able to say, wait a minute, this is not good paper. This guy wants us to work our junk accounts, his junk accounts. And, they save themselves a lot of money. So again, but having that understanding really, really helped them. It becomes very important.
Well, with all these new data sets that are coming into the marketplace, right, we're constantly bombarded with new data and we're constantly bombarded with new risk. And here's where I want to kind of convert. I know you talked a little bit about spending some time in the fraud space, right, as well as collections. And I know that's one of the kind of hot buttons right now from a TU perspective is really working on the avoidance of fraud, synthetic fraud, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about some of what you're doing over there at TransUnion from a fraud detection perspective?
Yes, thank you. This is a real passion of mine. Again, as I talked about at the opening, I'm very passionate for this industry and I want to see it do as well as it can. Fraud is a $20 billion a year problem, and every single bit of that is ending up in bad debt. And so you think over the years, all of that, synthetic's a great example. For those who don't know, synthetic fraud is a type of fraud where the person doesn't even exist. The fraudsters make up a name and an address, and they make up a social. Only 50% of available social combinations have been used. So they find one that hasn't been used yet. They create a credit report for this fictitious person. They get their score up, and then they go crazy. And then all this is, like I said, going into bad debt, and nobody ever can collect on it. We have created a synthetic fraud score that identifies the likelihood that account is synthetic. I would love to see this industry take that score in, especially debt buyers, and not buy those fraudulent accounts. You're never going to collect on them. They're going to look amazing because they had their credit artificially inflated, but they're just not. They don't exist. You're not going to collect on them. Same thing with an extended fraud alert. So if I'm a victim of identity theft, I put, and it's a confirmed identity theft, an extended fraud alert is put on the file and it remains for 6 years. So if you are working accounts that are less than 6 years old, you can get this alert that tells you, hey, this was a identity theft, confirmed identity theft. Don't, remove that from your work queue, because even if you do try to work them and contact them, then you're going to get in that process where you have to validate the debt and, and all that. And it's going to lead to more cost. These are simple things that we have today that we can provide. And if they're customers of TransUnion today, you're already getting the solution. We just need to add these to it. So we're really not even talking more money. This isn't like, but I do believe these type solutions will really help the industry. I love to fish. I live on the coastal. I live in coastal Georgia. I love to fish, and we always try to fish where the fish are. Right? Where are the fishing holes? Where are they at today? These attributes help you identify where the fish are. Where should I be placing my time, and not fishing where they're not. Right? So you're not going to collect on these fraudulent accounts. Add these alerts. Get them back with your scoring, and just remove more. You'll find more where they're not, then you'll spend more time where they are.
Well, I mean, it sounds like that demonstrates exactly the kind of the value attribute that you bring to the process, right? Like you just mentioned, literally, like here's a way in which you can avoid some risk, right? You can avoid the risk of synthetic fraud. You can also avoid the costs associated with collecting on that fraud. And oh yeah, by the way, if you're already using our systems, like you just have to add this to the package. This isn't necessarily an increased cost structure. Right. And that's where I started to learn a significant amount from you over the last couple of years when it comes to what is even available there. Because if we're not asking the questions, if we're not having the conversation with the guys like you, how would we ever know that some of these things are available and exist, right? You're almost like a product evangelist who's out there just to show you all of the cool things that are necessarily available, and with the cool side effect of not actually being out there to sell it, right? Like just trying to solve problems all day without having to sell, hey, look, work with the sales guys, they'll help you get that together. But like, let me show you the cool and fun things, which is why I always really enjoy our conversations at a conference, because we can go deep nerd, which brings me to kind of my final segment of questions here. I wanted to talk a little bit. Student loans is definitely at the forefront of the news these days, and I'm sure that is only going to become an even larger discussion point going deeper into the current election cycle. Correct. Talk to me a little bit about what it is that you guys are doing over at TransUnion. My understanding is there's like a whole new suite of products coming out specific to that market segment. Talk to me a little bit about what TransUnion is doing right now as it relates to the student loan debt.
So we have a new suite of student loan attributes that are coming out. We're constantly revising them and coming out. So we can do a lot of information about deferments. We can do a lot about public versus private student loans. We can talk to you about, what the amount of student loans are in default. That is, now that that's active again, that's become very important. So we do have a suite of products around those. We are also hoping to launch this year a suite of attributes on our, I'll call it alternative lender database. We bought a company years ago called Factor Trust, and they were the credit bureau to what I'll call the underbanked. So things like buy here, pay here car notes, payday loan, title pawn, those type things. And we have the data. We're trying to get approval to sell it to third party, which we're in the process of getting that done. When done, we will have, so if they, for example, are a thin credit file, maybe consumers that use payday loans, they do money orders, things like that. They don't have a banking relationship. We should be able to give you some information about, hey, you know what? How many positive ACH transactions or NSF transactions that they had, some things like that around to those non-traditional lenders that don't report to a credit bureau. So we have some things like that we're constantly, TransUnion years ago, we have a dominant share in the marketplace. I think it's somewhere around 80-85% of the market in third-party collections. The reason we have such a dominant market share is we years ago, we identified this industry where we wanted to put a significant amount of resources and investments and continue to refine and come out with new things. And these student loan attributes, these alternative lender attributes, the fraud stuff, all that coming together is just the next generation of the innovation that TransUnion is kind of committed to bring to the industry. And I've had a lot of fun, kind of like you. We're both kind of data nerds. I've had a good time bringing that to the market because I think it will add value. But we just got to get the industry to start consuming it and using it. And it's hard. I get it. There's a lot going on. There's a lot climbing for people's attention right now. And being able to, adding new things, looking at new things when you're just trying to, collect on, money and keep everything going, it's hard. But the benefit is so good. There's so much there that to be gained, if you can, continually look at these strategies as we were talking about at the beginning.
I think the ROI on the usage of data within the receivables management space is exponential.
Mhm.
The opportunities that arrive from our ability to understand what's in front of us, because what do we buy? We buy data files,
Yes.
right? Like even the accounts that we're purchasing are ultimately we're buying data and then appending that with additional data sets. And how are we going to operationalize the use of all of those different data sets together? And honestly, Jeff, that's why I really enjoy every time we get together and get to have a data nerd conversation. But for today, I really want to thank you for coming on and sharing your insights with me. I learned a little bit today, and I learn a lot from every conversation that we have.
Well, thank you so much. No, I really appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the platform. You are out there evangelizing, I think, like I am, for best practices, best use cases, and things like that. So we really appreciate what you do for us here as an industry as well. So thank you, Adam.
Well, greatly appreciated. For those of you that are watching, if you have additional questions you'd like to ask Jeff or myself, you can leave those in the comments on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we'll be responding to those. Or if you have additional topics you'd like to see us discuss, leave those in the comments below as well, and hopefully I can get Jeffrey to come back at least one more time to help me continue to create great content for a great industry. But until next time, Jeff, I really appreciate you. I look forward to seeing you at an upcoming show. And thank you, everybody, for watching today. We'll see you all again soon.
Thank you.